My name is Joseph Yazzy, and I have served as a Navajo Nation tribal police officer for 12 years. What I am about to tell you goes against every value I have sworn to protect, as both a law enforcement officer and a guardian of our people's traditions. But after finding those 13 hikers last month in a condition that even medicine couldn't explain, I can no longer remain silent. About 40 miles northwest of the south rim of the Grand Canyon, there is an area where it branches off into smaller canyons. Tourists don't know about this place. It's not even on the park ranger's maps. Helicopter tours are specifically routed to avoid this area. We call this place Sayichinolgai, Devil's Canyon in English, but this translation doesn't quite capture its true meaning. A more accurate translation would be something closer to the canyon that breathes darkness. If you're watching this from Arizona, Phoenix, Tucson, or Flagstaff, you've probably passed the unmarked dirt road leading there dozens of times without realizing it. State Route 64, mile marker 287. There's a weathered fence post with 3 eagle feathers tied to it, if you know what to look for. My people have been marking that spot for generations, not as a guide, but as a warning. I grew up hearing the stories. Every Navajo child in the western region knows them. Stories about the canyon where water flows upward during certain moon phases, where the rocks sing in harmonies that human voices can't produce. Where time moves differently, hunters would enter for what felt like hours and emerge to find days had passed, or worse, enter for days and come out minutes later, aged beyond their years. But I was modern, educated. I went to Northern Arizona University, got my degree in criminal justice, came back to serve my people with a badge and a rational mind. I believed the stories were just that, stories. Metaphors for natural dangers, maybe, or cautionary tales to keep children from wandering into genuinely hazardous terrain. That changed on September 15, 2024, when we got the call about the missing hikers. Their names were David Chen, Rebecca Martinez, and Kyle Thompson, 3 graduate students from ASU's geology department, who thought they'd discovered an unmapped canyon system through satellite imagery analysis. They'd ignored the no trespassing signs, dismissed the tribal jurisdiction markers, and according to the last text message Rebecca sent to her professor, they were about to make the discovery of the century. That text was sent at 3:47 p.m. on September 12th. By the time their professor reported them missing on September 14th, their rental SUV had been sitting at the canyon's edge for 2 full days, doors open, engine still running until it ran out of gas. I was the first responder, along with my partner, Officer Patricia Begay. Patricia's traditional. She still practices the old ways, performs the blessing way ceremonies, knows all the songs our grandmothers taught us. When dispatch told us the location, she went pale. "Not there," she said quietly. "Joey, we need to call this in to the feds. Let them handle it." But I was stubborn. These were kids, probably dehydrated, maybe injured. Every hour mattered in the desert, especially in September when the temperature still breaks 100 degrees by noon. We drove out in silence, Patricia clutching the medicine bundle she always keeps in her duty bag. The road deteriorated from asphalt to gravel to dirt, and finally to barely visible tire tracks through the desert scrub. The closer we got, the more wrong everything felt. The usual desert sounds, the buzz of insects, the calls of ravens, the rustle of lizards in the brush, all faded away until there was nothing but the sound of our engine and the whisper of a wind that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The SUV was exactly where dispatch said it would be, parked at the rim of a canyon that shouldn't exist. I've lived in this area my entire life, traveled every back road and trail, but this canyon wasn't on any map I'd ever seen. It was narrow at the top, maybe 30 feet across, but it descended into darkness so complete that our flashlights couldn't find the bottom, even though the sun was still high in the afternoon sky. The vehicle told a strange story. 3 sets of footprints led to the canyon's edge, but the tracks were odd. They started normal, but as they got closer to the rim, they became deeper, as if the hikers were suddenly carrying immense weight. The last few prints were so deep they looked like they'd been made by people weighing 1,000 pounds each. Inside the SUV, we found their research materials. Printouts of satellite images showing geological anomalies, radiation readings that didn't make sense, and a handwritten note in David Chen's journal that made my blood run cold. The rocks here predate the Earth itself. Isotope analysis suggests they're older than the solar system. How is this possible? Patricia was examining something at the canyon's edge when she called me over. Carved into the sandstone were petroglyphs, but not the usual ancient ones we find throughout the region. These were fresh, maybe a few decades old at most, and they showed figures I'd never seen in traditional Navajo art. Tall, impossibly thin beings with too many joints in their limbs, surrounding what looked like a spiral that seemed to pull your eyes into it if you stared too long. Below the petroglyphs, written in English with what looked like a knife or chisel, were the words, National Geographic Expedition, 1982. God forgive us for what we've awakened. Patricia grabbed my arm. We need to leave. Now. But I had to know more. I pulled out my phone to photograph the inscription, and that's when I noticed something impossible. My phone showed the date as September 18th. We'd lost 3 days in the 10 minutes we'd been examining the scene. Joey! Patricia's voice was urgent. She was backing away from the canyon, her hand on her service weapon. Look at the shadows. The sun was setting in the east, not west, east, and our shadows were falling upward, defying every law of physics I knew. That's when we heard them. The 3 missing hikers, their voices echoing from deep within the canyon, singing. But the song wasn't in English, wasn't in Spanish, wasn't in Navajo or any language that should exist. It was harmonious and discordant at the same time. Beautiful and terrible, and it made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Patricia started praying in Navajo, invoking protections I hadn't heard since my grandmother was alive. She pulled corn pollen from her medicine bundle, creating a circle around us. Don't listen to it, she warned. It's not them anymore. It's something else using their voices. The singing grew louder, and with it came other sounds. Drums that beat in rhythms that hurt to follow. Flutes that played notes between the notes. And underneath it all, something that sounded like breathing. Like the canyon itself was inhaling and exhaling. Then, silence. Complete, absolute silence. Even the wind stopped. 3 figures appeared at the opposite rim of the canyon. Even from 30 feet away, I could see it was our missing hikers. But something was wrong with how they moved. Their limbs bent in too many places. Their heads turned too far around. And their eyes reflected light like a nocturnal animal's, glowing a soft amber in the dying sunlight that was still, impossibly, setting in the wrong direction. Officers Yazzy and Begay, David Chen called out, though his mouth didn't move in sync with the words. We've been waiting for you. We have so much to show you. So much to share about what's really been hidden here. Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, and I noticed she wasn't touching the ground. She hovered maybe an inch above the rock, her hair flowing as if she were underwater. The National Geographic team was right, she said, her voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. But they were also wrong. This isn't a gateway, it's a wound. A wound in reality that's been bleeding for 68 years. Kyle Thompson laughed, a sound like grinding glass. The Manhattan Project. Trinity wasn't the first test. This was. July 14th, 1945. 2 days before Trinity. They tested something here that wasn't meant to split atoms. It was meant to split space itself, to create a doorway to somewhere else. And it worked. God help us all. It worked. Patricia's prayer grew louder, more urgent. She threw corn pollen toward the 3 figures, and where it touched them, their skin rippled like disturbed water. They screamed in unison, a sound that made my nose bleed and my vision double. "The Dene knew!" Rebecca shrieked, her form flickering between human and something else, something with too many angles. "Your ancestors knew to stay away. They marked this place with warnings. But the white men came with their science and their arrogance, and they tore a hole in the world." The ground began to shake, not like an earthquake, but like a heartbeat. The canyon was pulsing, expanding, and contracting. I could hear Patricia beside me, finishing her prayer, and suddenly the world snapped back to normal. The sun was in the west where it belonged. Our shadows fell the right way, and the 3 hikers were gone. But in the sand at our feet, written in what looked like volcanic glass that hadn't been there before, was a message. We're still here. We're all still here. Everyone who's ever entered the canyon is still here, waiting, watching, becoming something new. Patricia and I ran. We got in our vehicle and drove faster than was safe on that dirt road, not stopping until we reached the highway. It was only then that I looked at my phone again. September 15th, 4:23 p.m. We'd been at the canyon for less than an hour, but my body felt like I'd been awake for days. We filed our report, but within 6 hours, federal agents had arrived. Not FBI, not Park Service. Men and women in black suits with no identifying badges who thanked us for our service and told us that the matter was now classified under the Atomic Energy Act of 1946. We were required to sign documents that I'm violating by telling you this story, but here's what they didn't know. Patricia had been recording everything on her body cam, and she'd uploaded it to a private server before they confiscated our equipment. I have the footage. I have proof. And after what happened last week, after those 3 hikers walked into the Navajo Nation police station looking exactly as they had the day they disappeared, not having aged a single day, speaking in perfect unison about how the convergence is coming, I knew I had to share this. The hikers are in federal custody now, or at least that's what we were told. But I know better. I've seen the black helicopters flying toward Devil's Canyon at night. I've picked up radio transmissions in languages that hurt to understand, and I've noticed something else. Animals have started avoiding the area in an expanding radius. First, it was just around the canyon. Now it's spreading. 5 miles, 10 miles, 20. My grandfather was a code talker in World War II. Before he died, he told me that the military had asked them to encode more than just tactical information. They'd asked them to encode warnings, locations to avoid, things that shouldn't be disturbed. Devil's Canyon was one of them. He said the Army knew what was there before they ever conducted their test. They chose that spot specifically because reality was already thin. They thought they could control it, he told me on his deathbed. They thought they could harness it. But you can't harness chaos, grandson. You can't weaponize the void between worlds. The next morning, I went back to photograph more evidence. The canyon was gone. Not filled in, not hidden. Gone. Where it had been was smooth, undisturbed desert, as if it had never existed. But the radiation readings were off the charts, and in the sand, drawn with mathematical precision, were equations that hurt to look at. Formulas that seemed to change when you weren't watching them directly. I've been researching everything I can find. The 1982 National Geographic expedition that disappeared. The 1956 uranium mining team that was found fused into the rock, still alive but begging to die. The 1971 group of hippies who went looking for peyote and came back speaking in binary code. It's all connected. It's all the same event, happening over and over, rippling through time like waves from a stone thrown into still water. But the stone wasn't thrown, it was detonated, and the ripples are getting bigger. The elders called an emergency council meeting 3 days after the hikers reappeared. It was held in the old Hogan near Window Rock, the one that's been standing since before Arizona was a state. My grandmother's grandmother helped build it, and it's only used for the most serious of matters, treaty negotiations, war councils, and discussions of things that threaten the DNA as a whole. I wasn't supposed to be there. Tribal police officers don't usually sit in on elder councils unless specifically invited. But Patricia's grandmother, Mw18BlaR9H8, was one of the most respected Hatawi, medicine people, in the nation, and she insisted we both attend. "They need to hear this from the ones who saw it," she said, her weathered hands gripping her walking stick. "The young ones who still have courage to act." There were 12 elders present, each representing different clans and regions of the nation. The air was thick with sage smoke and tension. In the center of the Hogan, someone had drawn a sand painting I'd never seen before. It showed the canyon, but not as a physical place. It depicted it as a wound, with dark tendrils spreading outward like an infection. Thomas Benally, the eldest present at 93, spoke first. His voice was paper-thin, but carried absolute authority. "My father was there in 1945. Not at Trinity, but at the first test, the one they don't talk about. He was hired as a guide, told them it was a bad place, a place where the hero twins had fought something ancient and sealed it away. They didn't listen." He pulled out a leather journal, its pages yellow with age. He wrote it all down, in our language so they couldn't read it. "Listen, July 14th before dawn. They brought a device different from the one they would test at Trinity. This one was smaller, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. The lead scientist, a man named Krieger, said it wasn't meant to release energy but to absorb it, to tear a hole and see what was on the other side." Mw18BlaR9H8 took over, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The old stories, the ones we don't tell outsiders, speak of the Naye, the monsters that existed before the world was in balance. The hero twins destroyed most of them, but some they could only imprison. Devil's Canyon was one of those prisons." She looked directly at me. "Your grandfather knew this, Joseph. That's why he tried to warn them in code during the war. But they thought he was talking about enemy positions, not about what lay beneath our own land." Patricia spoke up, something unusual for someone so young in such a gathering. "The 3 hikers, when they came to the station, they weren't right. Their temperatures were all exactly 98.6 degrees. Their heartbeats were perfectly synchronized, and when we tried to separate them for individual questioning, they all said the exact same words at the exact same time. 'We are one now. We are many. We are the space between spaces.'" Elder Susan So leaned forward. "Show them the video, child." Patricia looked at me, then pulled out her phone. She'd managed to download the body cam footage before the feds wiped our servers. The elders watched in silence as the scene at the canyon played out. The backwards sunset, the floating hikers, the message in the volcanic glass. When it finished, Thomas Benally was crying. "It's worse than we thought. They didn't just open a door. They broke the seal, and now it's spreading." He had us follow him to a back room where ancient artifacts were stored. From a locked chest, he pulled out a map made on deerskin, probably 200 years old. It showed the Southwest, but not as modern cartography would represent it. Instead, it marked places of power, places of danger, and migration routes of things that weren't quite human. Devil's Canyon was marked with a symbol that looked like a spiral collapsing in on itself. But what chilled me were the other markings, thin red lines spreading out from the canyon like veins, connecting to other sites across Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. This map was made by my grandmother's grandmother, Thomas explained. She was a dreamer, could see things others couldn't. She saw this coming. Look, he pointed to dates written in a mixture of Navajo and Spanish along the red lines. 1945, 1956, 1971, 1982, 1997, 2010, 2024. Every time someone disturbs the canyon, the infection spreads. The boundaries weaken. What happens when all the lines connect? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Then the prison opens completely, Maria said quietly. And what's been contained since the fourth world began will be free in the fifth. That night, Patricia and I were assigned to patrol the area around Devil's Canyon, or where it should have been. The official story was we were looking for traces of the missing hikers, but we both knew better. We were making sure nobody else went near the site. Around midnight, our radio erupted with static, then cleared to reveal a transmission that shouldn't have been possible. It was in Navajo, but ancient Navajo, the ceremonial language that few people still knew. Patricia translated, her face growing paler with each word. The sleepers wake. The stone that holds reality cracks. 79 years of erosion, and the dam will break. Those who opened the way will become the way. Those who witnessed will become the testimony. Then, in perfect English, a voice I recognized as David Chen's said, "Officer Yazzy, we need to talk. Come alone to coordinates I'm about to send. Bring the journal your grandfather left you. Yes, we know about it. We know everything now. The coordinates appeared on my phone as a text from an unknown number. They led to a spot about 3 miles from where the canyon had been, a place where 3 large rocks formed a natural shelter." Patricia tried to stop me, but I had to go. My grandfather's journal, which I'd hidden since his death, supposedly contained information about the 1945 test that even the government didn't have. I arrived at the rocks at 1 a.m. The 3 hikers were there, but also not there. They flickered in and out of existence like a badly tuned television. Sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes something in between. When they were transparent, I could see through them to something else. A vast city of impossible architecture. Buildings that grew like organic things, streets that folded back on themselves, and in the center, a massive spiral structure that pulsed with dark energy. "Joseph," they said in unison, their voices harmonizing in ways that made my ears bleed. "You need to understand what really happened here. Not the story the government tells, not even the story your elders know, the truth." David Chen stepped forward, or rather, the thing wearing his shape did. In 1945, the Manhattan Project scientists discovered something in the equations. A frequency, a resonance that could tear holes in space-time. But they needed a specific location to test it. Somewhere, the boundaries were already weak. They found Devil's Canyon through old Spanish records from the 1600s, accounts of conquistadors who reported seeing cities in the sky and hearing voices from beneath the earth. Rebecca Martinez continued, her form solidifying slightly. The device they tested wasn't a bomb, it was a key designed to unlock doors that were sealed when your world was young. But they didn't know what they were unlocking. They thought they were opening a path to parallel dimensions, alternate Earths they could exploit for resources. Kyle Thompson laughed, that same glass-grinding sound. Instead, they opened a path to the spaces between dimensions. The void where things that can't exist in ordered reality make their home. We've been there, Joseph. We've seen them. The Naye your grandmother spoke of? They're real, but they're not monsters. They're refugees from collapsed realities, beings that exist in states of matter we don't have words for. Why are you telling me this? I asked, gripping my grandfather's journal. Because the convergence is in 3 days, they said together. October 1st, 2024, at 3:33 a.m. Exactly 79 years, 2 months, and 18 days after the first test. A complete orbital cycle of something massive approaching from the void. The government knows. They're preparing to detonate another device, thinking they can seal the rift. But they're wrong. It will only make it worse. David flickered more intensely. Your grandfather's journal contains the counter-frequency. He learned it from a German scientist who defected after realizing what they'd done. It's hidden in the songs he transcribed, the ones that look like code talking but aren't. If played at the right location at the right time, it could stabilize the rift. Not close it, it's too late for that, but stop it from expanding. They handed me, or rather materialized in front of me, a device that looked like a modified radio transmitter covered in equations and symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. This will broadcast the frequency, but it needs to be done from inside the phenomenon. Someone has to carry it into the rift. That's suicide, I said. No, Rebecca corrected, her eyes sad and ancient. It's transformation. Whoever does it won't die, but they won't be human anymore either. They'll become a guardian existing between states, keeping the door from opening fully. Why don't you do it? I asked. You're already transformed. We're corrupted, Kyle admitted. Infected by what's on the other side. If we tried, we'd make things worse. It needs to be someone clean, someone with the right bloodline. Your grandfather's songs, your grandmother's prayers, they've prepared you. You have resistances we didn't. They began to fade, becoming more transparent with each passing second. 3 days, Joseph. The coordinates are in the device. And know this, the government's team will try to stop you. They'd rather risk global catastrophe than admit they were wrong. Before they completely vanished, Rebecca reached out and touched my hand. For a moment, I saw through her eyes, saw the reality of what lay beyond the rift. Cities of living metal, oceans that flowed upward, skies with 17 suns, and at the center of it all, something vast and patient and hungry, pressing against the boundaries of our world like a child pressing their face against glass. I drove back to the station in a daze, the device hidden in my grandfather's journal. Patricia was waiting, along with Maria Begay and 3 other medicine people. They'd been performing protection ceremonies all night. We felt it, Maria said simply. The shift. The countdown has begun. I showed them the device, explained what the hikers had told me. Maria examined it with a mixture of fear and fascination. These symbols, they're not random. They're a mixture of Navajo, Hopi, Anasazi, and something older. Someone was trying to create a universal language of protection. Patricia had been researching while I was gone. Joey, look at this. Every major geological survey of the area has been classified. Every environmental study redacted. But I found something in a geology student's blog from 2010. She detected gravitational anomalies around Devil's Canyon that suggested the presence of exotic matter, stuff that shouldn't exist in our universe. Thomas Benally, who had driven through the night to join us, examined my grandfather's journal with new understanding. These aren't just songs, he breathed. They're mathematical equations expressed in tonal form. Your grandfather was a genius. He hid quantum physics in traditional music. We had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to decide if I would walk into an interdimensional rift with an untested device based on decades-old Nazi science hidden in Navajo code talking. 3 days before the government either made things worse or did nothing and let reality unravel. Maria looked at me with those ancient eyes. The hero twins faced impossible odds, too, but they had each other. You won't be alone, Joseph. The prayers of the Dene will go with you. That night, I dreamed of the canyon, but it wasn't a dream. I was there, standing at its edge, and across from me stood my grandfather in his World War II uniform. "Grandson," he said in perfect clarity, "I've been waiting here since 1945, holding the line. But I'm tired. It's your turn now." Behind him I could see them, hundreds of figures, maybe thousands. Every person who'd ever entered Devil's Canyon and never returned. They stood like sentinels, their bodies transformed into something between flesh and light, holding back shadows that writhed and pressed against an invisible barrier. "We're the antibodies," my grandfather explained. "When they opened the rift, some of us were changed into defenders. But we're failing. Each time someone disturbs the site, we grow weaker. The 3 who just returned, they broke through our line. More will follow unless the frequency is restored." "How do I know the device will work?" I asked. He smiled sadly. "You don't. But the alternative is certain. In 3 days, without intervention, the rift will expand beyond our ability to contain it. First, Arizona will change. Then the world. Reality will become negotiable. Physics will become suggestions, and humanity as you know it will cease to exist." When I woke, there was sand in my bed. Red sand from Devil's Canyon. And on my arm, burned into the skin like a brand, were coordinates and a time. 33 degrees, 14 minutes, 39.5 seconds north, 112 degrees, 55 minutes, 48.2 seconds west, October 1st, 3:33 a.m. The federal response came faster than expected. By noon, on September 29th, 2 days before the convergence, the entire region around Devil's Canyon had been declared a national security zone. Military checkpoints appeared on every road. Apache helicopters circled overhead, and anyone within 50 miles was being evacuated under the pretense of a chemical spill. But Patricia and I knew better. Through her contacts in Phoenix, she'd learned that something called Project Cauterize had been activated, a black budget operation that had been on standby since the 1950s, designed to handle what they termed ontological breaches. We were in the police station when Agent Sarah Winters walked in. She wasn't military, wasn't FBI, wasn't anything with a recognizable badge. She wore a black suit that seemed to absorb light, and when she moved, reality seemed to lag slightly behind her, like she was always a fraction of a second out of sync with the world. "Officers Yazzy and Begay," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist. "We need to discuss your recent contact with the anomalous entities." I played dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about." We filed our report. The missing hikers were found and transferred to federal custody. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw too many teeth. "Joseph, we know about the device. We know about your grandfather's journal. We know about the frequency. What you don't know is that we've been managing this situation for 79 years. Every solution has been tried, every frequency tested. Nothing works." "Then why try to stop us?" Patricia demanded. "Because," Agent Winters said, sitting down with movements that were just slightly too fluid, "what you're planning to do won't close the rift. It will stabilize it, yes, but in doing so, it will make the merger permanent. The 2 realities will be locked together forever. We prefer a clean break. Either our reality survives intact, or it doesn't. No half measures." She pulled out a tablet and showed us classified footage from 1945, the original test. I watched in horror as the device activated, reality twisted, and something vast and impossible began pushing through from the other side. But what struck me most were the people in the footage. Some of them weren't entirely human, even then. Dr. Krieger, the lead scientist, was the first to be affected, Winters explained. Within hours of the test, he began changing. Within days, he wasn't human anymore. He became something else, something that could exist in both realities simultaneously. He's still alive, if you can call it that. He's what I am now, a hybrid, tasked with monitoring and containing the situation. Her face flickered, and for a moment, I saw what she really looked like. A geometric impossibility of angles and light, beautiful and terrible, existing in more dimensions than my mind could process. Every person who gets too close to the truth changes, she continued. Your 3 hikers, the National Geographic team, the uranium miners, they're all part of the containment now, whether they wanted to be or not. And in 48 hours, when we detonate the new device, they'll all cease to exist. A mercy, really. You're talking about genocide, Patricia said, her hand moving to her service weapon. I'm talking about survival, Winters replied. There are currently 2,847 changed individuals connected to the Devil's Canyon anomaly. They exist in a state between life and death, between here and there. When we cauterize the rift, they'll finally be at peace. And if it doesn't work? I asked. If your bomb just makes things worse? She stood, her form solidifying into something almost human. Then, we implement Protocol 7, nuclear sterilization of the entire Southwest. Better to lose 3 states than the whole planet. After she left, Patricia and I sat in stunned silence. Maria Begay entered with several other elders, having heard everything through the thin walls. She's lying, Maria said firmly. Not about everything, but about the most important part. The frequency in your grandfather's journal won't make the merger permanent. It will create a barrier, a membrane between worlds. They'll be able to coexist without contaminating each other. Thomas Benally nodded. The hero twins didn't destroy all the monsters because destruction isn't always the answer. Sometimes you must learn to live with danger, to manage it, to maintain the balance. This is what your grandfather understood. That night, we made our preparations. The elders performed a protection ceremony over me that lasted 4 hours, painting my skin with symbols that seemed to glow with their own light. They gave me a medicine bundle containing items from every clan: turquoise for protection, corn pollen for blessing, obsidian for cutting through illusions, and white shell for clarity. Patricia had been busy too. She'd hacked into the military's communication system and learned their exact timeline. The cauterized device would be detonated at 3 a.m. on October 1st, 33 minutes before the convergence point. We had a narrow window to act. At midnight, I set out alone, despite everyone's protests. The device was strapped to my back, my grandfather's journal in my pack, and the medicine bundle around my neck. But I wasn't really alone. In the darkness, I could see them, the spirits of all the code talkers who had died, walking beside me, their mouths moving in constant prayer. The military perimeter was extensive, but they were looking for conventional threats. They didn't expect someone who had been blessed by the old ways, who could move through shadows like smoke. The symbols on my skin seemed to bend light around me, making me difficult to see or remember. I reached the site where Devil's Canyon should have been at 2:30 a.m. The area was crawling with military personnel, all focused on a massive device that looked like a mechanical spider made of black metal and pulsing cables. At its center was a sphere that contained something that hurt to perceive, a piece of folded space, trapped and weaponized. Agent Winters was there supervising the final preparations, but so were others like her, hybrids who flickered between human and something else. They moved through the soldiers like ghosts, adjusting equipment, taking readings, preparing for an event that would either save or damn us all. At 2:45 a.m., the ground began to change. Where the canyon had been, reality started to thin. I could see through the earth to something beneath, not rock or magma, but architecture. Vast structures of living geometry, cities that breathed, technologies that were also organisms. The other reality was pressing against ours like water against a dam. I activated the device the hikers had given me. It hummed to life, displaying equations that rearranged themselves constantly, adapting to the changing conditions. My grandfather's journal fell open to a specific page. Not code talking, but musical notation. A song I remembered him humming when I was a child. I began to sing. The effect was immediate. Every hybrid in the area turned toward me, their faces showing expressions of recognition, horror, and hope in equal measure. Agent Winters started running toward me, her form shifting rapidly between states. "Stop!" she screamed, her voice fracturing into multiple harmonics. "You don't know what you're doing. The frequency, it's not a barrier, it's an invitation. It's calling them here." But I couldn't stop. The song had taken hold of me, flowing through me like electricity. The symbols on my skin began to glow brighter, and I could feel myself changing, becoming something more than human, but not quite other. The military's device activated at 3 a.m. exactly. A pulse of impossible energy erupted from it, racing toward the thinning boundary between worlds. At the same moment, my device reached its crescendo, broadcasting the frequency from my grandfather's journal at a volume that could be heard in dimensions we don't have names for. The two forces met exactly where the canyon had been, and for a moment, everything stopped. Time froze. The stars held their breath. Reality itself paused to see what would happen next. Then the world exploded into impossibility. The canyon returned, but not as it had been. It existed in multiple states simultaneously, solid and gas, past and present, here and there. I could see all of its history at once. The ancient sea that had carved it, the Anasazi who had first discovered its properties, the Spanish conquistadors who had sealed it with Christian prayers and native magic, the army scientists who had broken those seals. And I could see the beings on the other side. They weren't monsters. They weren't invaders. They were explorers, scientists, refugees from a universe where different laws of physics had led to different forms of life. The rift wasn't an attack. It was a doorway they'd been trying to close from their side for 79 years, just as we'd been trying to close it from ours. Agent Winters reached me, her form now fully inhuman, a cascade of angles and impossibilities. But instead of attacking, she embraced me. "You beautiful fool," she said, thought, existed at me. "You've done it. Not what we planned. Not what they planned. But something new. You've created a stable paradox. A door that's simultaneously open and closed." The convergence hit at 3:33 a.m. Reality didn't end. It didn't merge. It did something unprecedented. It learned. The two universes, instead of destroying each other, began to communicate. The frequency from my grandfather's journal wasn't a barrier or an invitation. It was a translation key, a Rosetta Stone for realities that had been trying to understand each other since 1945. Through the canyon, which now existed as a kind of dimensional embassy, beings from both sides could meet safely, exchange information, learn from each other without contaminating their respective realities. The changed individuals, the hybrids like Agent Winters and the three hikers, became interpreters. existing in both states simultaneously. But the transformation came with a cost. I could feel myself changing, my human consciousness expanding to accommodate perceptions and concepts that Joseph Yazzy was never meant to understand. I was becoming one of them, a bridge between worlds. Patricia appeared at my side, having somehow made it through the military perimeter. She grabbed my hand, anchoring me to humanity even as I drifted toward something else. "Stay with me, Joey," she pleaded. "Remember who you are. Remember why you did this." Behind her came the elders, led by Mw18BlaR9H8. They formed a circle around us, chanting in Navajo, creating a bubble of human reality in the midst of cosmic chaos. And in that moment, I had a choice. Let go and become a full hybrid, able to help manage this new relationship between worlds, or hold on to my humanity and remain limited but myself. I looked at the canyon, now a shimmering impossibility of overlapping realities. I could see the beings on the other side, waiting, hoping, fearing just as we were. I could see Agent Winters and others like her, existing in a state of constant translation between incompatible truths. And I could see the future, not predetermined, but full of potential, dangerous and wonderful in equal measure. "I'm sorry, Patricia," I said, feeling my hand become less solid in hers. "Someone has to do this. Someone has to be the voice between worlds." But she didn't let go. Instead, she began to sing, not my grandfather's song, but her own. A blessing way, a protection ceremony, a declaration that I was still Dine, still human, still Joseph Yazzy, no matter what else I might become. The other elders joined in, their voices creating a harmony that wrapped around me like armor. And something unexpected happened. The transformation stopped halfway. I became something unprecedented, even among the hybrids. I could perceive both realities, communicate with both sides, but I remained anchored in my humanity, my identity intact. Agent Winters stared at me in amazement. "That's not possible," she said. "No one has ever maintained their core self through the change. The Dine have always walked between worlds," Mw18BlaR9H8 said proudly. "Sky and earth, spiritual and physical. This is just one more boundary to navigate." The military stood down, realizing their device had been neutralized, and that the situation had resolved in a way none of their protocols had anticipated. The beings from the other reality retreated to their side of the canyon, satisfied that communication had been established. And Devil's Canyon became something new, a controlled point of contact between universes, monitored by those who had been changed and protected by those who remained human. But we all knew this was just the beginning. The crack between worlds couldn't be sealed, only managed. And there were other cracks, other places where reality was thin. The map the elders had shown me indicated dozens of sites across the southwest alone. As the sun rose on October 1st, 2024, painting the desert in shades of gold and red, I stood at the edge of the transformed canyon with Patricia, the elders, and Agent Winters. We were an unlikely alliance, traditional and modern, human and hybrid, military and indigenous. But we were united in purpose, to prevent either reality from consuming the other. "What happens now?" Patricia asked. I looked at my hands, which flickered between solid and translucent, human and other. Now we learn to live with a new kind of truth. The world isn't what we thought it was. It never was. But maybe that's not a catastrophe. Maybe it's an opportunity. Agent Winters nodded, her form stabilizing into something almost human. "The government will want to control this, classify it, weaponize it. But they can't, not anymore. Too many people have been changed. Too many witnesses exist. The secret is out." "Not out," Mw18BlaR9H8 corrected. "Transformed. Like Joseph." The truth exists, but it exists in a way that protects itself. Those who aren't ready to understand simply won't see it. The canyon will be invisible to most, just another piece of restricted federal land. But for those who need to know, who are called to be guardians, it will reveal itself. 3 months have passed since the convergence. If you're watching this, it means the containment protocols have failed, or the truth has become too large to hide. Either way, you need to know what's really happening in the American Southwest, and why your reality might feel less stable than it used to. I'm still Joseph Yazzy, still technically a Navajo Nation tribal police officer, though my duties have expanded far beyond writing traffic tickets and breaking up bar fights. I'm what Agent Winters calls a membrane walker, someone who exists primarily in our reality but can perceive and interact with the others that press against it. Devil's Canyon is no longer hidden. Oh, it's still invisible to most people. Their minds simply refuse to process what they're seeing, replacing it with empty desert or impassable terrain. But for those who are sensitive, those who are changing, it's become a beacon. They come from across the world, drawn by dreams of impossible cities and harmonies that human throats can't produce. We've had to establish a formal screening process. Patricia leads it, having developed a test that determines someone's ontological flexibility, their ability to witness and survive contact with alternate realities without losing their sanity or their humanity. About 1 in 10,000 people have the potential. Of those, maybe 1 in 100 can actually handle the truth. The 3 hikers, David, Rebecca, and Kyle, have become our primary interpreters. They exist now as living conduits between realities, their consciousness spread across dimensional boundaries. They look human when they need to, but I've seen their true forms. Geometric impossibilities that hurt to perceive directly, beautiful and terrible, like living equations that solve for multiple realities simultaneously. "It's not so bad," David told me last week, his voice coming from 17 different directions at once. "Imagine being able to see every possible version of yourself, every choice you could have made, all existing simultaneously. The hardest part isn't the transformation, it's choosing which version to be at any given moment." The government has officially acknowledged the situation, though only to those with the highest security clearances. Project Cauterize has been replaced with Project Membrane, focused not on destroying the rifts, but on managing them. Agent Winters, whose real name I've learned is Dr. Sarah Winters Krieger, descendant of the scientist who conducted the first test, heads the initiative. "We've discovered 17 stable rifts across North America alone," she explained during our last briefing. "Devil's Canyon is the largest, but there are others. The Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, the Marley Woods in Missouri, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Each one is a potential breakthrough point, and each one needs guardians. The Navajo Nation has become an unofficial training ground for these guardians. The elders, led by Maria Begay and Thomas Benelli, have developed a curriculum that combines traditional spiritual practices with quantum physics, ancient songs with mathematical proofs. They teach people how to maintain their identity while experiencing infinite realities, how to be bridges without losing themselves in the crossing. But not everyone is happy with the new reality. There are groups, some religious, some scientific, some governmental, who want to return to the old paradigm. They call themselves the purists, and they believe that any contamination between realities will eventually lead to the collapse of both. Last month, they tried to detonate a nuclear device at Devil's Canyon, hoping to cauterize the rift through brute force. They didn't understand that the canyon doesn't exist in just one location anymore. It's spread through quantum entanglement to every place where someone has been changed. The bomb would have killed millions of innocent people who carry traces of the other reality in their consciousness. We stopped them, but barely. The battle, if you can call it that, took place across 7 dimensions simultaneously. I fought versions of myself that had chosen different paths, defended against attacks that came from parallel timelines, and watched Patricia die and live and die again in overlapping possibilities until we found the one sequence of events where everyone survived. She doesn't talk about it much, but the experience changed her. She can see probability streams now, the likely outcomes of any action spreading out like branches of an infinite tree. It's made her the best tactical officer we have, but it's also made her sadder. When you can see every possible future, she told me, you also see all the ones where things go wrong. Every happy ending is shadowed by 1,000 tragedies. The beings from the other reality have been patient with us, more patient than we probably deserve. They call themselves the synthesists, not their real name, but the closest translation our languages can manage. They're not invaders or conquerors. They're survivors of a universe where the laws of physics evolved differently, where consciousness and matter are more fluid, more interchangeable. Through the canyon, we've established a kind of cultural exchange. They teach us about technologies that are also philosophies, show us how to build structures that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, help us understand that reality is more negotiable than we ever imagined. In return, we offer them something they lost long ago: stability, causality, the simple pleasure of existing in just one state at a time. But there have been costs. The children born near the rifts are different. They see colors that don't exist, hear music and mathematical equations, dream of places that won't be discovered for another 1,000 years. My sister's daughter, only 3 years old, builds toys that violate the conservation of energy, creates drawings that move when you're not looking at them, and sometimes speaks in languages that won't be invented until humanity evolves past the need for vocal cords. They're not sick, Dr. Winters assures us. They're adapted. Evolution doesn't wait for permission. These children are humanity's response to a universe that's become larger and stranger than we ever imagined. The military has tried to weaponize the rifts, of course. They always do. They've sent soldiers through, hoping to establish bases in other realities to claim resources from worlds where different evolutionary paths led to different technologies. Most don't come back. Those who do are changed in ways that make them useless as soldiers. It's hard to follow orders when you've seen the infinite ways those orders could play out, when you've experienced the fundamental arbitrariness of any single chain of command. There was an incident last week that the news won't report. A passenger plane flew too close to Devil's Canyon during a reality fluctuation. For 17 minutes, the 247 people on board existed in 3 realities simultaneously. When they landed, each passenger remembered a different flight. Some recalled turbulence that never happened. Others remembered conversations with people who weren't on the plane. A few insisted they'd seen cities in the clouds, whole civilizations existing in the spaces between seconds. The airline is calling it mass hysteria. We know better. Those people have been touched by the truth, and their lives will never be quite the same. They'll dream of impossible things, create art that doesn't follow the rules, have children who see the world from angles that shouldn't exist. The change is spreading, slow but inevitable, like ink through water. I've been back to the canyon every day since the convergence. It's my job now, my calling, my curse, to stand at the boundary and translate between worlds that were never meant to communicate. Each time I go, I lose a little more of my original self and gain something impossible to describe. I'm becoming like the canyon itself, a paradox, a stable impossibility, a door that's simultaneously open and closed. My grandfather visits me there sometimes. not his ghost. Ghosts are simple compared to what he's become. He exists now as a pattern in the quantum foam, a protector spirit that's also a mathematical equation, a song that holds reality together at the seams. He tells me stories of the code talkers who've transcended death to become living encryption, consciousness that exists as pure information, protecting both realities from mutual annihilation. "You did good, grandson," he says in words that are also wind, also light, also the space between atoms. "You found the third option, the path between destruction and surrender. But the work isn't done. It's never done. Balance must be maintained every moment, every breath, every heartbeat." He's right. The rifts are multiplying, not just here, but globally. The event at Devil's Canyon sent ripples through the quantum substrate of reality itself. Places that were merely thin before have become transparent. The boundaries are failing or evolving, depending on your perspective. In Siberia, an entire city phased into our reality for 3 days before phasing back out, leaving behind only confused memories and impossible architecture. In the Australian outback, Aborigines are reporting that the dream time is bleeding into the waking world, that stories are becoming flesh, that songs are taking physical form. In Switzerland, the Large Hadron Collider detected particles that don't just violate the Standard Model. They seem to be rewriting it in real time. The world's governments are meeting in secret, trying to decide if this is humanity's next evolutionary leap or our extinction event. They don't understand that it's both and neither. We're not dying or ascending. We're adapting to a universe that's infinitely stranger and more alive than we ever imagined. Patricia thinks we have maybe 5 years before the changes become undeniable to everyone. 5 years before reality becomes so fluid that the old paradigms completely collapse. Some people will embrace it, become something new and wonderful and terrifying. Others will fight it, clinging to a stability that no longer exists. Many will simply go mad, their minds unable to process a world where effect can precede cause, where identity is negotiable, where death is just another state of being rather than an ending. But there's hope. The children who are being born now, the ones who see reality as it truly is, fluid, alive, infinite, they don't fear the changes. To them, this is normal. They play with possibility like previous generations played with blocks, build friendships across dimensional boundaries, learn mathematics that includes imaginary numbers as physical quantities. My nephew, Patricia's son, asked me yesterday if I remembered when the world was simple. I told him it never was. We just couldn't see the complexity before. He laughed and said, "That's okay, Uncle Joey. Simple is boring anyway." Then he showed me a drawing he'd made of Devil's Canyon. In it, the canyon was a smile on the face of the earth, and through that smile, 2 universes were learning to sing together. Maybe that's what this is, not an invasion or a merger, but a conversation. A dialogue between realities that have been shouting at each other across the void since the Big Bang, finally able to hear each other's voices. It's messy and dangerous and often terrifying, but it's also the most important conversation in human history. I don't know what comes next. None of us do. The future has become non-linear, a garden of forking paths where every possibility exists until it's observed, where Schrödinger's cat is simultaneously alive, dead, and something that transcends both states. But I know we'll face it together, human and hybrid, traditional and modern, those who guard the boundaries and those who cross them. Devil's Canyon still breathes in the desert, inhaling one reality, exhaling another. The rocks still sing their impossible songs. Water still flows upward during certain moon phases. And somewhere between realities, in a place that exists and doesn't exist, My grandfather and all the other guardians hold the line, keeping the worlds in balance, ensuring that the conversation continues without either voice overwhelming the other. If you've made it this far in my story, if you haven't dismissed it as the ravings of a madman or the plot of a science fiction novel, then you're probably one of us. One of the sensitive ones. One of the changing. And if that's the case, I have a message for you. Don't be afraid. The world is not ending. It's not beginning. It's doing something else entirely, something we don't have a word for yet. You might see things that shouldn't exist. You might dream of places that won't be discovered for centuries. You might find yourself changing in ways that terrify and exhilarate you in equal measure. This is normal now. This is evolution. This is humanity's next chapter. And if you ever find yourself near the Southwest, near a stretch of desert that seems to shimmer with possibility, near a place where the maps lie and the compasses spin, know that you're welcome. Devil's Canyon is waiting for you, as it's been waiting since 1945, as it waited before humans walked the earth, as it will wait long after we've become something unrecognizable. The door is open. The bridge is built. The conversation has begun. All you have to do is listen, and maybe, if you're very brave or very foolish, speak back. Ya'ate. In beauty, it is begun. In beauty, it is finished. In beauty, it walks between worlds. This is Joseph Yazzy, Membrane Walker, Bridge Keeper, translator of impossibilities, signing off from Devil's Canyon, Arizona, where reality is just a suggestion and the only constant is change. If the government comes looking for me after this broadcast, tell them I've gone where they can't follow, not because I've disappeared, but because I exist in too many places at once for any single authority to claim jurisdiction. The old world is ending. The new world is beginning. And in between, in the spaces that were never supposed to exist, we're building something that transcends both. Welcome to the future. It's weirder than you think.